Hi, my name is Alicia Lobos, and I attend Grand Canyon University, Master's in Forensic Science. And so I'll be discussing the quality management standards, specifically quality assurance and quality control, and how they play vital roles in forensic science. So when we look at quality assurance, it basically focuses on the procedures that are followed by the laboratories, lab technicians, and the superiors as they ensure the quality of the evidence analysis is observed. The quality control focuses on maintaining the ongoing goals of what quality assurance um, by monitoring and ensuring the evidence analysis results. Um, and so in this, these standards also provide for an audit process. An audit process is basically a system where evidence and information is obtained by the laboratory and the processes that were followed. The Any kind of statements or anything that is relevant to the audit. Um, the audit process is usually conducted either for accreditation purposes or because there was some type of violation, and so that's when the audit process begins. Now, in reviewing the audit process, we look at the International Organization of Standardization, the ISO, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, IEC. 17025 and 17020, which are part of the forensic science laboratory standards. And so the 17020 encompasses the bodies performing the inspection, and that is the operation of how a laboratory provides their procedures, the methods of performing the inspection of the evidence, um, how it is retrieved, how it is the technician obtains the evidence analysis, what procedures are followed. And the 17025 is how competent of a testing the lab technician can provide within the laboratory to verify the laboratory provides the tools and methods capable of providing the competence of the testing. And so, after reviewing these standards, which are part of the audit process, they have to meet these standards in order to be considered a effective laboratory, um, and even for the accreditation process. And so, when looking at the accreditation process, it kind of goes in hand with the audit process, where there's 5 steps that are included, and that is the preparation, the application, the pre-assessment, and the assessment and the accreditation. So the preparation of is a process where the laboratory prepares for the necessary audits for the accreditation, whether providing the necessary documentations, whether the laboratory needs to be have certain procedures in place. So anything that prepares the laboratory and the lab technicians for this audit to begin. And then the application is then submitted with the fee that goes with it. And once that is submitted, that is basically the application stating that they are in compliance, that they believe that they're in compliance with the ISO and IEC 17025 and 20, and the structure of the ISO 9001. And so the application is submitted and reviewed. Before the audit begins, there is an optional informal visit that may be conducted, but that is something that would have to be paid extra if the lab prefers. And this may be used to ensure that if there's some kind of questionable issues within the laboratory, the lab technicians that they may use before going through the process of the accreditation. The assessment is then conducted by the independent agency performing the accreditation. where they review the procedures that are conducted by the laboratory, any records of the laboratory, and the evidence analysis. Um, they interview the staff and the supervisors. Um, any activities that are conducted, they are observing those activities. Um, they check the laboratory, up and down and right and left. So once that assessment is conducted, then they are able to provide that information to the decision maker of the accrediting agency. And in order for the decision maker, they have to verify that the process conforms to the ISO IEC 17011, the management standards. And so, if this is something that they believe the laboratory and the lab technicians um, comply with, then they are become accredited. And so, this accrediting process is done every 4 years to ensure that these laboratories that have chosen to go through the accreditation process maintain their competency. And so this is the accreditation process. And so we then review a case that came to light from the defendant, or he's a prisoner, James Edward Owens III, as he submitted a habeas corpus misconduct against the Houston Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, and specifically Jonathan Salvador, the lab technician, and that reviewed his evidence analysis. And so, in reviewing Mr. Owens' case, he was detained by the troopers uh, that verified that Mr. Owens did have in his possession the marijuana and alprazolam and cocaine substances. The marijuana Mr. Owens did admit to owning and purchasing it for $1,000. Now, the other two drugs, since he did not admit to them, were tested by the lab. And this is where Mr. Salvador came into play. According to the habeas corpus misconduct, Mr. Owens submitted, and the judge granted a review of the misconduct. The judge decided to use a Cody's five-factor test, and this five-factor test includes the process of where the technician was to provide, or the Mr. Owens was to provide that if these five factors were met, that Mr. Owens would be exonerated. The test only provided three that were met, and not the last two. The three that were met included that Mr. Salvador was the one performing the lab analysis, the evidence analysis. He was also the one that committed multiple misconducts in other cases, and he was the technician that worked on this case. The other two that did not concur were Mr. Salvador committed a misconduct while committing other misconducts, and the technician, Mr. Salvador, handled and processed the applicant's case within roughly the same period of another misconduct. So those two did not meet, those last two, and so for that reason, Mr. Salvador was not charged, and Mr. Owens was not exonerated and remained in custody. Besides the fact that he had already admitted to the marijuana charge. Mr. Salvador was then terminated from his position, but was not charged. And this is a lesson learned for the lab to ensure that the lab technicians they hire are competent, to conduct the test accordingly and not conduct the test called dry labbing, which is what Mr. Sopeler was accused of by taking evidence from other cases and using it for this case. And and that's what concluded for this case.